All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome again to another series of EcoTV series as it were here on Oaks TV. I remain your host, Chuka. I have with me here Dorothy, our marketing manager. I also have joining us Toby. Toby remains our data manager here. And of course, also our lead data analyst. We also have Rejoice, who is our social media manager, joining us on Ghost Mode. As always, please just feel free to follow us on our social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook. And of course, you can also subscribe to our newsletter, www.oaksintelligence.co, and then you'll be met, of course, with the sign up page there to sign up to our newsletter. All right, so let's do a deep dive into what we have for this evening's series. Toby, when we met last week, we were talking about federal government training 3 million tech talents. Of course, we didn't ask anyone for a projection for the week, but in hindsight, what will you say has been your experience as a Nigerian living in Nigeria for the last 1 week?
Well, at the risk of sounding redundant, I'd say that nothing has, I won't say nothing has changed, but the direction in which change is occurring has not changed. Things are getting more expensive by the day, and it's people keep saying it's every time something like every time you get an extreme, I hear people say, "Oh, I guess it's pinpoints in the Nigerian economy," and then you feel like, "Oh, this is the worst it can get," and then the next day something else comes again, and you're like, "That's the pinpoint." So the question is, I don't know how elastic the Nigerian economy actually is at this point because, I mean, I don't know what to say. Anyway, let me give you an example. Today I was on Twitter and I saw that the cost of one golden penny spaghetti is now 750 naira. 750 naira for one golden penny spaghetti. And then I remember we used to buy spaghetti 150 naira. You know, and when I'm saying we used to buy, it might sound like I'm speaking of 10 years ago, but this was just like less than 2 years ago. One spaghetti used to go for maybe 150 last 200 naira. And this is 2023 and we're paying 750 naira spaghetti. You know, people were now raising a lot of other comparisons, like the cost of mat sets. Mat set those days that you buy mat set 100 naira, 150, it costs 55 now. You know, so a lot of things like that. The question remains how much more can the Nigerian resident or citizen take? So, and as I said, I don't know how elastic the economy actually is because I think it's worse.
Dorothy, I think over the weekend, what we had in Nigeria was the off-season elections in Kogi State, Bayelsa, and I think Imo State. I mean, with all the clamor for rule of law, you know, ensuring that every person's vote counts, do you think the presidential election and the outcome of the court cases at the Supreme Court, do you think in any way it affected the participation of voters in this last elections?
Well, so thanks for the question, Chick. So the presidential election and the gubernatorial election that happened in Kogi State and other states, I don't think they have anything to do in common. The shocking thing is some of the results from Kogi States and that of the presidential election are even way higher than that of the presidential election. So it's surprising how they do the whole counting and things like that. And at the same time, people are also scared for their own life. So possibly to have effects on people that come out to vote also. Everybody is trying to be careful at this period and try to play safe because at the end of the day, the result will still be announced and the person that has already played this game or they've determined to get the results still have to win. So it's not really about the voting of the people anymore. So everybody's just relaxed. Okay, anybody can just take this thing like that. So a lot of people didn't really come out, but the vote still counts high for those people that still wants to lead, or maybe the party that are on board like APC are still having the highest votes, kind of like that. So I think they already know how they play these things. So that's just what I said. Like,
Okay, let me come back to Toby before we go into our deep dive. Toby, I mean, are we getting to the stage where Nigerians no longer seem to be, like interested anymore? I mean, what will be will be. Is that becoming the outlook of or the disposition of a typical Nigerian, especially the young people?
Well, yes, it's generally I'll say it's the general feeling, because after the outcome of the presidential elections, the gubernatorial elections, and then the court case, an everyday Nigerian is going to feel like, what's the whole essence of it? What's the point of it? So, what's the point of the rule of law? What's the point of in fact, all the government bodies and councils that are supposed to oversee things like this, right? If the court is saying, if the justice system is saying that what's the word now? And a mandatory part of the exercise is now considered, optional, because the mandatory part of the exercise that the result of each polling unit is supposed to be uploaded on the online server and everything after the elections, and then that was what I was taking to court, and then the court is saying no, it is an optional part of the exercise. They did not have to do that. So the question for me as a Nigerian, there is no voter confidence. Let me just put it that way, because now, what's the point of being like, go out there and the way elections work in Nigeria, it's not just about going out to vote. It's almost as if you are risking your life, because at some point there'll be violence, there'll be troubles, political, robbery and all that. So the question is, why do I have to risk my life for something that will not eventually count? So that's just, I would say that's general, particularly for the young people. And it is very, very dangerous, because over time, the young people take up a huge part of our population. So if they are not confident in the election process, then you are going to have fewer voters, and then it even gives more avenue for let's say, the corrupt people have their way.
All right, thanks, Toby. We have joined us another returning guest, Emeka. Nice to have you on board. We are just reviewing the happenstance as it were across Nigeria over the last 1 week. Okay, let's do a deep dive into our currency. Basically, I've just been looking at the the currency tracker, the foreign exchange currency tracker that we have for the one that was valid as at 8th of November, 2023. Toby, when we were talking last week, one of the things we hinted was that there seemed to be a merging or an alignment of parallel markets and what we have as the CBN rate, maybe I and E window values. So there were rumors that governments had some windfall from some deals or whatever, and those were being used to settle some of the outstanding foreign dominated debts. The problem here is that over the last 1 week, we began to see dollar strengthening again against the Naira. Of course, the question here is the government's plan of strengthening the Naira one born out of, information management, or one that actually has a concrete plan to boost production? What do you think, Toby? From the policies you have been seeing the government come up with, do you think their plan in strengthening our currency is one driven by media manipulation, or is one that actually is underscored by some very, strong and, well put up policy?
Yeah, if we look at it critically, we see that it falls more forward than the latter. And I say that because it looks like every action by the government is in the bid to kind of shock the market. So it doesn't look like there's really a cogent policy, a cogent action plan to restore. I mean, we need to boost our exports. We need to boost our local production. We need to do things that will actually strengthen the Naira, bring in more foreign investors. What's the action plan for that? Instead, we've had Naira being announced that it was floated. We've had the pouring of money again by the federal government. We've heard of things like, a depletion of foreign reserves as well. So the question is, everything that the government seems to have been doing is just in a desire to shock the market. And every day, they tell you that, or they mention that, the Naira has appreciated, the Naira is getting stronger. I mean, just today, the Naira has fallen back down to Naira 85 Naira in the CBN market. It was just 800 and something Naira about last week. So the question is there really any progress there? And like we said, the parallel markets and the CBN markets, the idea of parallel markets is that it's supposed to be parallel to the CBN markets. Ideally. But then it's so divergent that the question is like, what's the parallel there? So I'll say that we need to see government do more than talking, do more than announcing, do more than, we are going through this, we are going to do that. Where is the action plan? Like, how are we actually going to make sustainable progress?
All right, thanks, Toby. Emeka, let me ask you a question, because during the campaign period, during the electionary period for the presidential elections, I think one of the presidential candidates made a comment about foreign exchange, where he made mention of the fact that salaries were not being paid in dollar. So we had one popular comic strip that came out there where the question was being asked: is it for Eba? Is it for Ewa? Is it for Gary? Is it for beans and dodo? What's the relevance of a stable foreign exchange for Nigeria, or favorable or a strong Naira? What's the importance of a strong Naira, let me say, or a stable Naira? So there are two questions now. What's the importance of a stable Naira and a strong Naira for an average Nigerian youth in this digital age that we find ourselves?
Hi everyone, good evening. So I think there are two issues here. One, there is the advantage of perception. It's very easy to lose sight of the fact that in economics, a lot of things are based on data, but perception in terms of the mindset of the consumers and the citizenry also plays a very critical role in terms of how the market evolves. Nigerians over time have placed a lot of attention and focus on the exchange rate, and there's a perception in the mind of the average Nigerian, especially when you consider the fact that we're a remittance driven. Our economy is largely remittance driven in terms of how a lot of Nigerians cope, right? So if I receive $100 from a relation who is outside of the country, the weaker the Naira, the more money I have. But Nigerians are also realizing that, okay, I may seem to have more money in my hand, but doesn't mean I can spend more money. So it means that the more Naira I exchange against the dollar, it appears that there's inflation and the value of the goods I can buy also reduce. So because of perception, it will definitely go a long way to help Nigerians in terms of believing that there's some bit of stability, right, in the economy. Whether or not that is backed by macroeconomic realities is a different ballgame entirely. But on the other hand, it's also the fact that Nigeria is a very, very import-driven country, and we rely a lot on imports. And to be able to import things, you don't use Naira to import things, you need dollar to import things. So if the companies that are importing and if the individuals, the businesses would have to import raw materials, and there's a struggle for the dollar because the dollar is scarce and you have to exchange more Naira to now get the dollar, it means that a lot of things will not get imported. Now, it's not so much a problem when people are not able to import as much as they would like to import, if that is part of an overall national economic plan that is seeking to reduce importation in favor of development of our economy and production of many things we import. But unfortunately, that is not the case. To be able to carry out certain business activities in Nigeria, say, I was having a conversation with someone, I think that was last week, and the person was talking about the fact that, oh, why can't Nigerians set up companies to build something? I can't remember what item it was now, instead of importing it. And I'm like, you are trying to compete against China, for example, in goods imported from China. Meanwhile, the amount of money you are going to spend here in Nigeria producing those goods, it will still be cheaper for you to import those goods from China, because the average Nigerian cannot compete with the Chinese, who are producing these things at economies of scale and their cost is lower. They have cheaper raw materials, they have the supply chains, and also all you just have to do is tell them what you want and bring it here. So it is very, very important. The stability of the currency is definitely very, very important for our ability to import things that we need to import. Yeah, because we rely a lot on importation. So those two factors are very critical. The issue of perception and the issue of importation.
Yeah, Toby, just before we go into our deep dive for what we have today, I think one of the things I'm trying to understand here is, Rebecca, I think you'll be able to throw some light here on this too, is the fact that when the government plans to train these tech talents, many of the services or software applications they will be using is going to be they're going to be foreign based. These are things you have to subscribe for using, Forex. And many of our cards no longer work overseas. So how does the government want to encourage a country that is largely young, right? In a society that is mostly digital? How do you want to encourage these people to be able to access these services and, of course, compete favorably with their counterparts, from other countries, across Asia, and the global north in general? Sorry.
Well, I would say that it certainly makes sense more difficult because, like you said, for example, having to subscribe to, in fact, I think I just always have to have examples, but just within the last 2 weeks, Google announced, or they sent me an email, I subscribed to Google the cloud storage system, and sent me an email saying that the price of the subscription is being increased from about 350 naira to 950 naira. That's almost 300%, in terms of cost. So for me, and obviously that's to balance the whole effect of the exchange rate. So for me as a Nigerian, I'm now having to pay more for the same service, right? Now that extends to a lot of the other platforms that young tech entrepreneurs or career personnel also use. So it means that as the currency flow, and the one thing that you will observe is that people are quick to react to a depreciation, but they are not always quick to react to an appreciation. So, for example, if today the naira drops to 1,000 naira, you see that many sellers, many merchants, they will adjust their prices to fit that depreciation. But if the next day it appreciates for like 1 week, they will take their time, a lot of time in fact, before they adjust the same prices. So you see, people are quick to react to negative change than positive change. So it means that as a young person in Nigeria, I'm going to have to suffer the brunt of the lack of competence by let's say the central bank to manage and make sure that Naira is trying its best to recover from the unfortunate down.
Yeah, there's this illusion in Nigeria that this thing it doesn't really affect the common man. Yeah. But people don't know that economies and lives, industries are actually built on just the stability of the currency. Many people don't care the value of the exchange rate. Just let it be stable. That helps them in planning and long term. Okay, we're going to do a deep dive into our leaderboard today, and I've just been reviewing the leaderboard, and I think it's important for me to point out something here. When we start over the last couple of weeks when we've been doing this review of leaderboard, one of the things we've seen is that the northern states are actually the most affordable states, right? So they occupy the top 10 position of our leaderboard. It varies, across them, but usually it's stable now. And then at the early stages of this cycle, our EcoTV series, we didn't really have any northern states in the bottom 10. But for the past couple of weeks, we've begun to see two states, or a state and the FCT, begin to play into the bottom 10 states. So Kano and FCT Abuja are beginning to, come and settle in with the boys. What's the implication of this? I mean, what does this imply, for the average person living in these particular places?
Well, typically, of course, the direct implication of this is that over the past week, or over the past few weeks, there have been reasons or causes for commodities to become more expensive over there. But then again, we have to take into it's always good to put things in I'll say bigger or a larger context, right? Because a lot of for us to generate the score that we have, that's we consider about 5 different categories of items. So there's food, there's electricity, there's food, other commodities, rent, transportation, as well as wholesale food and retail food. So it could imply that a certain category of items are actually seeing some kind of drastic change. For the FCC, I would say I'm not too surprised about that, because we already know that accommodation has always been quite expensive in the FCC. In fact, it's always been a tie between the FCC and Lagos, and that means that FCC always has a kind of lower mid-range position in the leaderboard. But then also, I would like us to consider the fact that things are also changing in other states. So the position is relative to other states. So it means that the fact that if last week FC had the score 1.4, this week had the score 1.6. So as last week, if as at this week now, the FC was 1.4, it's probably even be lower on the scale. So it means that like I said, we have to put things into. We can't just isolate it and say, oh, things are already becoming more expensive here. It could just be that things are getting a little better for other states, thereby pushing the FC and Kano downward. But also you have to consider the fact that the scores by these two particular regions are quite low, 1.8 and 1.6. So we should pay some kind of attention to these two particular regions.
All right. I think, Toby, I will leave the leaderboard there so we can have enough time to do a deep dive into the interesting part of today's series. Last week when we met, we were examining a government policy. That was the training of 3 million tech talents across the country. And one of the things our guest speaker there, Emeka, mentioned was that you cannot innovate your way out of poverty. So government has these bold plans of training 3 million tech talents. But when we examine the policies, the plans the government has in executing that, I think we saw a lot of flaws and pitfalls. And of course, it was obvious that in the long term, such policy was going to be a massive disaster. In fact, we came to the conclusion that the government may perhaps be training the next talent for Yahoo or advanced field fraud in Nigeria. Today, we are going to be looking at another policy that the government has given some backing to, and also, of course, looking at that both from the policy perspective and also a common sense review, of how feasible this policy is going to be. And that's the student loan policy by the government, the whole idea of, supporting students in tertiary institutions across the country. So we had our research team in the company, Kuna and the research team. They helped us to, scout around the country, picking out federal universities, state universities, and all that. I have my calculator here. And of course, I was going through the supplementary budget. And the idea is for us to discuss, and then so we can agree and then do some basic calculations here. So what we're going to do, Toby, Dorothy, Emeka, is simple. we're going to agree on what is an average cost of. So we're going to look at it from this perspective. So we're going to agree on what's the cost of school fees for a new student, right? So we're going to look at what is the school fees or tuition. Universities say they're still not charging school fees. It's tuition. So what's tuition fees like? In a university, we could use any university for our assessment case. We're going to look at the cost of registration. So tuition is different from registration for new students. When you get admitted into our institution, you pay registration fees and others. So we look at the registration fee, what's like an average cost for a Nigerian student. We also look at the cost of faculty dues and departmental dues. So what will a student spend in the faculty and in the department, as dues? We are going to also look at the cost of accommodation. So normally, what's the cost of university accommodation like, and of course off-campus accommodation, just to give us some perspective. And then we're going to agree on feeding. I mean, Toby, you just mentioned today now that one spaghetti, golden penny spaghetti, is 750 naira. So we're going to be realistic and agree on a figure of what a typical Nigerian student should spend on a monthly basis for feeding. And then we're going to look at some things like data, phone calls, right? And of course, transport. What should a student spend on that? And lastly, we're going to look at what a student will spend on handouts. The assumption here is that this student doesn't even go for hangouts. So this student doesn't go to the cinema. Maybe it's a guy, doesn't have a girlfriend, it's a lady, she doesn't even have a boyfriend. Just a serious student on campus. And then what we want to do here is to look at how many students because what the 2023 supplementary budget approved is 5.5 billion naira. So let's assume that 100% of this money is going for students. So January 2024, government was to dish out this money to students in the country. And we want to look at how many applicants we have, how many admissions are done yearly in Nigeria. And then we want to see how many students this particular money can cater for in one academic session. And then we want to know if this plan, shows that the government is serious in actually supporting students across the country. So the first thing is, let's agree, Dorothy, what do you think would be a typical tuition in a university, let's say UNILAG or any of the universities, for a new graduate, a new matriculant into the university? So let's say this person is maybe science department. Just give us a figure. Tell us the university.
Okay, so so I think UNILAG, UNILAG for a new students, University of Lagos for new students, let me say tuition fee, they should be looking at 180. Let's say they are looking at 180. Yes.
180,000.
Yes.
180K. So 180K. Okay, so registration fee, what will they pay for a new student normally?
Okay, so I think their registration fees and try to confirm. Yes. Hello?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Hello, am I heard? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So let's just say registration fee, they are starting with 35,000.
Okay, so before we lost Dorothy, we agreed on 35K for that.
Or maybe 30,000 naira for registration fee.
Okay, are you going for 35 or 30K, Dorothy?
Okay, so let's just say 35.
35, okay.
Me, I'm going for 35.
35. Yes. So what will faculty dues and departmental dues be like for this particular student?
Wow, that's actually another one. So faculty dues and departmental dues, I think the whole thing now has become so elaborate that they bring it in different patterns. Some of the charges are really what cannot even be explained for or what it's really going to. So sometimes some of this fee might even be higher than that of the registration fee. If they are looking at the 35K for registration fee, they might even be spending at the end of the day roughly 45 or 40 for all those little miscellaneous. Pay for this, pay for that, you pay for this, and before you look, yes.
So let's agree on 40K for faculty and departmental dues. So, Dorothy, what is accommodation like on campus at University of Lagos cost?
But the struggle to get accommodation on campuses these days are just very high. And the University of Lagos, because of high demand. So I think for a single bed, let them say they're going for 55 to 60,000 naira for a single bed, maybe someone also, not even just a one room, somebody shared rooms. Yeah.
Okay, so 60K on campus. But if we are going outside campus, what are we looking at? Just one route for somebody, for a student.
Outside campus it's extremely something else for students. If a student wants to stay outside campus for a room self-contained, and then with the high amount of charges that they take from the agency fee and other things also, they should be looking at for a room and all those things 650,000 naira.
It is what? So is this around the Yaba region?
Yes, yes, around the Yaba region for total package, you say total package, house rent and all, 650 to 800 sometimes.
Okay, let's go with the low one of 650K. Now let's go to Philly Dorothy. So what do you think is, I mean, Toby just gave us these shocking statistics today that spaghetti is now 750 naira golden penny. So a student at the University of Lagos now that wants to feed in a month, what do you think is a minimum amount that student can survive? We're not saying the guy or the student is eating like a glutton. This is just basic eating, normal meals, just to survive and keep body and soul together. What are you looking at monthly? Don't be afraid to give us a number.
Okay, so if a student should be spending monthly, what a student should be spending roughly monthly? That's aside transportation just for feeding.
Just feeding, yes.
Let's say a student should be spending nothing less than roughly 45,000 naira in a month for feeding. Yes, because the food, gas, they have gas, other things they have to use for the cooking is extremely high. There is actually so much to spend on feeding, really. You know, so let me say 45,000 naira for just an average student to spend.
Okay.
Yes.
45K. Toby, I'll come to you now, Toby. For data, phone calls, and transport, what do you think should be an average fee for average amount for a student? These three together. I mean, data for a month, phone calls in a month, and then transport, maybe from hostel to lecture theater, or they even went out to buy food stuff, and bring it to the hostel and things like that. What do you think, looking at when you combine these three together?
So if we are
so the first thing is
Dorothy. Yeah, Dorothy, you were saying something.
Okay, so MTN has even increased the price of their data right now. Yes, what used to be 500 naira is now 600 naira. So I think that, and then Airtel at the other hand is like you are recharging and then the data is going on the other hand. So it's just so complicated right now for data. So call card also, I don't know if the VAT charges have increased or something, but the value we used to get is not the same anymore. So if a student wants to do homework at home, he needs to connect his laptop to his phone or something, or Wi-Fi. So imagine how much he's spending at home to do all those things. And then also cost of transportation has skyrocketed because of the fuel scarcity and then the high price of the fuel that
so can we agree on 10K?
We all know. So if a student wants to spend transportation data
and phone call,
no, I'm not even giving it 10K. I think 10K is very small for all those three things. Yes, wow. 10K is very little for a month. For a student to spend 10K is very little. So I'm even giving it 25K just to be fair for an average student. Like, let's say 25K.
So the last one we go to Dorothy is handouts. So what will you say a student should spend in a year? This is an academic session now on handout. First semester, second semester combined together. Just photocopying textbook, photocopying course material. I know that photocopying is expensive. I mean, what are we looking at as an average spend now for a year? So let's assume that the student is, assume that the cost of photocopying is 100 naira, and the student is photocopying, let's say, 200 pages of work for an academic session. So 200 times 100 naira is 20,000 naira.
20,000 naira, yes. So
that's for
so if there's like 40,000 naira for the 2 semester, if he's using just 20 per semester, 20,000 naira, 200
so want to
copies.
go.
So let's say
They want us to
40,000
go
naira.
40K for the year. Okay.
Yes.
So everyone, what we have now is 180K for school fees, tuition, sorry, 35K for registration, 40K for faculty and departmental dues, 60K for accommodation. We're assuming that the student is staying on campus, 45K for feeding, 25K for the bundle of data, phone calls, and transport, and then 40K for handouts in a year. Now, tuition is for one academic session, registration is one academic session, faculty due one academic session, accommodation one academic session, feeding is per month. So that means that for a full academic session of, are we going to say 12 months now? So 45 times 12. So 45K times 12, that is 540,000 naira for 1 year. Feeding is 25K per month. So 25K times 12 is 300K for 1 year. And of course, we have 40K per year for handout. So when I total this together, what I have is 180 plus 180 plus 35 plus 40 plus 60 plus 540. Now this is scary. Plus 300 plus 40. So I'm having a million naira, 195,000. So Dorothy, I just want to ask, is this are we being for real here? Emeka, is this for real?
This is real. This is real. Yes. So
Toby, is this for real?
Yeah, well, I would say, in my own opinion, I would say the accommodation took quite a large chunk of it.
Accommodation is just 60K.
Is it 60? I thought it was 600K that you mentioned.
We use
Oh,
60K.
Yeah, using the on-campus.
Yeah, the on-campus accommodation.
Oh,
yeah. So feeding.
that makes sense now.
Yeah. So Emeka, is this for real? Yeah, Emeka, we can hear you.
Yeah, if you look at it, when you're looking at it over time, right?
Yeah, 1 year.
So yeah, it's easy to miss, and I doubt many students ever calculate this. But I would say it's something close in today's
$1 million
life.
plus for a federal university. So a new student coming into a federal university at the University of Lagos, for instance, we are using an average salary, so we don't care whether it's science student, engineering, or medical student. Is going to spend about $1 million naira, over $1 million naira, to have just a balanced life on campus. This is serious. Okay, now the reason why I brought this up, and I'm happy we've done this calculation, is that the government announced 5.5 billion for student loan. And so if we assume that we round down this figure, rather than 1.2 million naira, we bring it down to say 1 million naira. At 1 million naira for each student, 5.5 billion divided by that is 5,500 students. Right? If we assume that the 1 million naira figure is even outrageous, and let's cut it by 50%. And so let's see what it costs a student for a full year in federal or state university in the country is 500,000 naira, which is 500,000 naira. It means that the 5.5 billion naira will be able to finance 11,000 students for 1 year. Now, this is the concern I have today. The number of admissions we have in a year for 2022 or thereabout is over 500,000. Let's take the round figure of 500,000. If government is able to finance just 5,500 students out of 500,000 students admitted in an academic year, 500. How many percent is that? I mean, 5,500 students, right, divided by 500,000. I mean, that's just about 1.1% of the student population. If the government is doing 11,000, that's double, that's just 2.2%. So my question to this panel this evening is, and I'll start with Toby. Toby, what we've done here is basic maths, is common sense, right? We went from the extreme of 1 million naira and we came to 500,000. We know that for a student, 500,000 is more than realistic for an academic session. And the government of the country that wants that, a country where the median age is 18 years, meaning that half of the country's population, right, is below 18. That's the implication. In such a country, the government voting just 5.5 billion naira. Does this show ambition on the part of the government, or does this show that the government is actually serious, about the whole idea of supporting students, in their tertiary education journey?
I would say that first of all, it's the idea that the government was this whole loan thing was, we are doing our best to tilt towards free education. So we cannot provide free education right now. However, we are going to be giving loans to people to start with, and then we can pay back 2 years after NYSC. But then the first question is, just like you have pointed out, this very, very basic calculation. No, this cannot. If you are taking for 1% of the possible number of people that are going to be needing something, let's say theoretically or hypothetically needing this kind of service, and you're only catering for 1% of them, I mean, what exactly are we doing? That's the first thing. So first of all, the allocation is not, and of course, a lot of people have come out saying that the allocations for this is not sufficient to make the necessary impact. The second thing is the plan of the government was to make this an interest-free loan, right? Meaning that you don't need to pay interest. So the question is, how exactly is the government going to, will I say, continue to fund such an allocation, right? Because if there was interest on the money, okay, it means that possibly every year you're getting more than what you pumped in last year. So you can do more this year, you can do more this year. But then it's interest-free, and so it means you are not able to make any money from it. So that's another thing. The third thing is that how do we even expect people to pay for this loan if they ever got to it, right? Because first of all, when schools announce that they're increasing their own school fees, in fact, UI used to cost around, back then, let me not say back then, like it's too far away, but like back in 2016, at least I know, UI used to be about 28 something thousand naira, 30,000 naira for school fees. Now a UI student is paying above 50,000 naira. So, and calculate cost of accommodation as well, calculate cost of transportation as well, calculate cost of data, cost of feeding. There's food inflation rampant in the country now. There's fuel subsidy that started the cost of transportation. So the point is, it is neither sustainable nor feasible. And we have to also consider the fact that there is most likely going to be mismanagement of this fund. So it's not even the full 5.5 billion that is going to be eventually allocated. There is going to be mismanagement of a huge part of these funds. So what it raises so many questions that even as I don't have to be an economist or a professional to see that this does more harm than good. Because again, the last part I have to consider is, after the people, let's say I'm able to get the loan for 4 years. So if I get a certain amount for 4 years, let's say I'm owing 2 million naira to the government at the end of my 4 years, we are able to pay 2 years after the NYSC. Employment rate is a shambles. There are not enough jobs for graduates. So there's no even guarantee that after my education, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to get enough job, a good job to pay back the money. So the point is, on all fronts, it raises so many questions. So is it worth the risk of putting myself in debt and not being able to pay back, to the government? So it's like I said, it's neither sustainable nor feasible, and it's one that raises a lot of alarms. Basically, for me as a person, it raises a lot of alarms. I'm very, very grateful that I do not have to be a student right now, at this point in time. But then I pity the coming generations. I really pity the coming generation.
Yeah, just before I go to Dorothy, I'll just say this story. I got into University of Ibadan in 2008, and I remember that for about 33,000 naira, as at then, if I'm not mistaken, I was able to pay my school fees and also pay for accommodation in Independence. So 33,000 naira. So I'm imagining, years after and hearing you say school fees is over about 150,000. So that's like 10x what I must have paid.
Yes, they release a circular, and in fact that 150,000 naira is for some departments. If you are a science student, you are going to pay because you have to pay something like laboratory fees, business fees like practical. If your department is going on field trips, you pay for things like that. So we are looking at a federal university where I am having to pay over 200,000 naira just for school fee. Accommodation in UI was also recently increased. So it's mind blowing.
Dorothy, in a country where minimum wage is 30,000 naira, NYSC core members earn 33,000. I mean, the people who this loan will finance their education, when they come out of the university system, the first bit of alawi or payment they will get, right, in the course of their service to the nationhood is 33,000 naira. In such a country, do you think it makes any sense for school fees or the cost of education to be this outrageous?
So it doesn't make any sense to me, because if really they would still come out and collect 33,000 naira, because 30,000 naira as minimum wage, and it is expected that for anybody to be able to get this loan, his or her guidance must have at least 500,000 naira annually. So if someone is expected to have 500,000 naira annually and the minimum wage is 30,000 naira, that means this very loan is not really for the low class or for the poor or anything. It's still for the elites or people that are already in high places.
No, Dorothy, I think
how do you expect me to have 500?
No, Dorothy,
Yes.
I think the loan is that the household income will be less than, it should not be more than 500,000. So if they are saying people household income should be less than 500,000.
It shouldn't be more than 500,000.
Yeah,
it's even worse. It's even worse.
That's the meaning.
I can't even pay for it.
Okay, let me come to Emeka.
Yes.
Emeka, I mean, the concern here is this. There are people that also make the argument that education is not cheap. Quality education has a price to pay. And they draw corollary from the private universities. Look at Covenant, look at Afebabalola, look at all these universities that charge very high amounts and they are able to give good education to their students. My question to you is, how do you think the government should balance this idea of making the loans available to a wide pool of students and also allowing the universities to have that, because the universities want autonomy. But autonomy comes with a responsibility, which means universities need to hike the cost of the services they render, to increase their IGR. How do you think this balance should be created in hiking of this cost, government providing enough resources for a wide pool of students to ensure that students are also able to get quality education?
I think first we need to decide on the system, the economic system that will run our universities. Are we running a capitalist system like you have in the United States, where universities are sort of independent, funded by school fees largely, and funded by endowment? Or are we running a welfare system like you have in certain states in Europe, where you can enjoy free education or heavily subsidized education, and at the end of the day, you may still have to rely on some bit of student debt, right? But when you come out, you see the disparity, right? You definitely see the disparity. I think that's the dilemma Nigeria has. But let me first bring out what may be unpleasant to some of our ears. University is not for everybody, if we are being very honest with ourselves. And the reason why there's a lot of hype around universities in Nigeria is because we have other institutions in the country that have failed and that are failing, right? You have polytechnics that are failing. You have technical institutions that are failing, we are unable to, even the universities we are talking about, how equipped are they? We are talking about science students paying more fees than other students. Do we have science labs? How equipped are the science labs? What are the equipments they have in their laboratory? So it's almost like a joke, and we are just in a catch-22 situation. But the truth is, the reason why we are so fixated on universities is because the other educational institutions we have do not work sufficiently. If they worked sufficiently, right, we'll be able to send people to polytechnics and they'll come out and they'll earn a good living, right? You do your HND1, do your HND2, you come out and you'd have sufficient knowledge and experience. Send people to vocational schools, right? Even something as basic as styling, carpentry. We don't have Nigerians who are very efficient in that. We have to bring people from Cameroon, Togo to do many of those things, especially if we want some level of quality to be done in those professions in Nigeria. So it's a shame, to be very honest. I think we are losing sight of the more serious conversation, because the truth is, the university is not an end in itself, right? People pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to American universities, right? And yes, there's been the argument, Democrats and the Republicans, about whether or not to cancel student loan debts and things like that, which the Supreme Court overread to some extent. But the reality is that even when you're paying such amounts in the United States, the potential is high, right? The opportunities are widespread. You pay your debt over time, no problem, but you earn a living, you still be able to get mortgage. There are still opportunities, right? There are still things you can do, right? But coming to Nigeria, we're talking about debt. Let's be sincere with ourselves. We don't have an economy to sustain that. We don't have an economy to sustain something as basic as, see Empower. See what happened with Empower, the loans that we're giving out for Empower. See what loan sharks companies are doing when they lend money to people. They have to resort to blackmail to get their monies back. We don't have a sufficient credit system, retail credit system in Nigeria, right? And credit system for the poor that can sustainably lift people out of poverty at scale. So we're just in a rigmarole trying out methods. If we don't deal with the most substantial things, right, the university will just be a scapegoat of larger sociological and socioeconomic issues, and we'll keep arguing back and forth, but would never solve the problem. But another thing I would like to say is, to be very, very honest with you, right, in spite of the challenges that we have in Nigeria and all that, we don't have sufficient data. To be very fair and sincere, we don't have sufficient data that shows that Nigerians who genuinely want to attend universities are unable to attend universities because of poverty. I'm sorry to say that. We do not have sufficient data. If we have sufficient data that shows the level of, we talk about out of school children, 10 million, 20 million out of school children. We don't even know how many children are out of school in Nigeria. We keep saying between 10 and 20 million. Now bring that to secondary schools. We don't know how many children are not in secondary schools in Nigeria. We just keep talking about primary education. Now when you come to the university, we do not have sufficient data to show that 5 million Nigerian children, students, secondary school graduates are unable to attend university annually because they cannot afford fees. Most often than not, of course, we did have classmates in universities who could not afford fees and everything, but we always have those welfare schemes. You have fellowships, you have churches that step in. Nigerians always find a way. So we don't have sufficient data that even shows that the problem we are trying to deal with is a problem at scale. Why I'm saying that is, an alternative would be to say, okay, what are the means by which university students who struggle with meeting their academic needs are currently solving those problems? So I'll give you an example. When they have issues, they go to a religious organization, right, to sort out their problems. Can we not partner with those religious organizations to say, these organizations have been doing, we saw that happen in Anambra State, right, parochial schools, where Peter Obi partnered with schools that were being run by Catholics, the Anglicans, and we saw what came out of that, right? So why don't we look at the systems that are already working for Nigerians who are stranded, right? The family systems, so instead of just giving a loan from the government, you get the loan through a private or through a company that your parent works for, through a religious organization, we bring it at the community level, which is what Nigerians already currently use. That way, we can have better conversations around this issue.
All right, our time is fast spent. I'm just going to take your comments your projections for the next week for the country. So I'll start with Toby. Toby, I mean, we've had very excellent conversations here today. For the next 1 week, where do you think Nigeria is going to? Are we heading to Valhalla, or where do you think we're going to?
Well, I don't know. I would say that I don't. I don't sound like you always say, like a no open club, but the truth is, I am still looking forward to a key change that is going to happen, that is going to drive, like I said, the changes that are happening in the negative in the other direction. So far, it's been like everything that happened is really changed in the negative direction. We are just looking for the catalyst that can spark something up and reverse the direction of this change. There was a Nigerian economic summit that was held about 2 weeks ago, and there were a lot of things said, a lot of ideas raised, a lot of, like I said, we talk a lot in Nigeria, talk, policy. But then, even key economists are asking, where is the action plan? Okay, this is what you want to do. Where's the action plan? So until I actually see an action plan, I see actual. Let me just use another thing. There was this I think this tracker NG that tracks the projects that went on around the country. And then if you see the rate of completion, rate of abandonment of a lot of these projects, but when I read it, I had to take time to actually study because it was appalling. Seeing Oyo State having less than 20% completion rates for projects, you see a lot of development projects that were given assigned IDs and names that were just ambiguous. So you see, when you see things like that, and that's what just last year. So and that was after the economic summit, by the way. So when you see things like that show you that the people that are in charge do not really care, it's really just makes me lose all confidence in the government. So again, until I see an action plan, my mind is not changed.
Dorothy, for the next 1 week, what are you thinking? Do you think that people will be able to go to market and buy golden penny for less than 750?
I don't think these things are magic. So there's a lot to be done, but let's just be optimistic about everything.
So you think that so the outlook is still bad in the country?
We're still left behind. There's a lot to be done. Yes, so let's just be optimistic about everything.
Emeka, you are away, but I mean, what do you think about Nigeria? Do you think in the next 1 week something miraculous can happen?
No. Things will just continue as it is and continue their slow decline till something. How do they say it in physics?
So it says everything will continue in uniform state of rest, the uniform motion state of rest until acted upon by an external force.
External force.
So we are on our way to destruction until somebody catches us from going on the cliff.
It's sad, and it sounds fatalistic to say that, but we'll continue in our gradual decline to a state of, if care is not taken, to Ghana that cannot pay for their cocoa exports, right? We continue that steady decline till we find out that we've gotten to a state that it'll be so hard to return from, except something external happens, of which I can't really think of anything external happening right now.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We've had an extended discussion today. You can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at OxIntel. We're also on LinkedIn, and of course, we're also on Facebook, Ox Intelligence. Until we meet again next week, do have a splendid evening. Thank you.
Hello there. Ox Intelligence is one of the fastest rising technology and business companies that offers services such as software development, where we build, maintain, support, and provide assistance throughout the entire software development lifecycle. We have built a massive team of enumerators across the country who amass data for us on a weekly basis. The data collected is used to curate interesting newsletters and beautiful content that keep our subscribers abreast of the economic health of our country. That's not all yet. We also offer consulting services for business analysis and process improvement for your products and services. We have authored economic and financial books for children and teenagers, and finally, we offer project management services to help you execute tremendous projects, making your dreams and goals achievable and a reality. To get more information about us and regular feeds from us, you can follow us on all of our social media handles.